Welcome to episode 29 of the Left Crew Politics Podcast. I am the host for this episode, Rick Shew. With me today is political commentator and Mr. Twitter himself, Dave Quast. Dave, what's going on, man?
Hey, how are you? It's good to be here.
It's great to be here. Great to have you here, I should say. I've been a fan of yours on Twitter for some time now, and I hit you up about doing a podcast, and here we are.
Well, I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. So, before we get into our discussions, there's several things I want to talk to you about. Tell our audience just a little bit about who you are, your political journey, and basically what I want to hear is, why are you on a political podcast right now? Like, what led you? And I don't mean me asking you, but you know what I mean. What got you involved in politics?
Well, my dad was heavily involved in politics back in Washington State. When I was growing up, and even before that, he was aligned with the liberal wing of the Republican Party, which, believe it or not, for many of your listeners, was a thing and was a big thing, particularly in the Northwest, where I grew up, and also in the Northeast. And my dad worked closely with Governor Dan Evans and a bunch of other prominent Republican politicians then, and I sort of grew up in that environment. So at the time of my political education, in my little corner of the state especially, the Democrats were the conservative party. So I actually was a Republican for most of my career. I was a political consultant. I held minor party offices. I worked as a campaign manager. I worked on Capitol Hill for the chairman of the House Banking Committee during the Clinton years. And then eventually I wound up doing corporate public affairs and communications work for corporations and for nonprofits in New York City and then in Los Angeles, which is what I still do today. And it was back in about 2008 when it became clear that Sarah Palin was going to be acceptable to the Republican establishment that I really knew I needed to finally switch parties. But since then, along with some never-Trumpers like Max Boot and others, I've come to realize that the liberal critique of the Republican Party was really right all along, that all those trappings of religiosity have really been a cover for institutionalizing things like racism and patriarchy, and that's how a Republican candidate could get endorsed by David Duke without the establishment disavowing that candidate and even embracing him.
Right.
Yeah. And I've also been, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've also been very active in reproductive rights activism throughout my kind of political career. I've been a long time.
Is it even before the transition from Republican to Democrat?
Oh, yeah. Even back in college, I used to volunteer at Planned Parenthood. Now I've been a longtime board member of my local Planned Parenthood affiliate. And I also teach at the University of Southern California as well. So I stay pretty busy. And I should also add that I don't speak for any of the organizations that I'm affiliated with, obviously.
Sure, absolutely not. And you're a family man. You have triplets, correct?
I do. I have 12-year-old triplets and a 22-year-old as well. So I have my hands.
Yeah, right. Full. Absolutely, man. I have two kids, and they're 2 years apart. I can't imagine. Yeah. That's cool. So I'm going to kind of circle back here to the reproductive rights part of because it's fascinating to me that you had this transition from well, let me ask you this. Who was sort of your Republican hero? Were you a Reagan Republican? If you could point to somebody?
No, I mean, besides my dad, it really was Governor Dan Evans, who I knew a little bit, Senator Slade Gorton, Lieutenant Governor Joel Pritchard. I mean, these are all household names to people who grew up in Washington State. Some of them went on to serve in Washington, D.C. as well. So it was really, I mean, for example, Governor Evans' wife was on the statewide board of Planned Parenthood in Washington. I mean, every Republican I knew was pro-choice. I didn't really realize that there was such a thing as conservative Republican until around the time that Reagan was running. And as sort of a young Republican type, I mean, I did sort of embrace the Reagan thing, even though I always disagreed about, certain key issues like reproductive rights, and had it been a much bigger issue then, gay rights as well. But, I sort of ignored for a long time, because of the environment I grew up in, I ignored for a long time the burgeoning power of the religious right. And, now we realize that was really just a cover for lots of awful other things. And it finally got to the breaking point. I just could no longer call myself a Republican. And I think a lot of even pretty conservative Republicans now that are aghast at what Trump is doing are coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I try so hard sometimes to pinpoint that transition of a Republican Party that I had respect for, even though when I would disagree with them. Like, even with George Bush, who I had major issues from Iraq on, and I did not vote for him. Okay, I voted for Al Gore. With that said, I stood by him. He was my governor. I'm from Texas. And obviously, I thought his dad was actually rather effective one-term president. not necessarily my favorite president of all time, but George Bush Sr. had some redeemable qualities as a leader. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, he did. And I'd take someone like him right now in a New York minute over what we have.
And he was a war hero, if nothing else.
Yeah,
I mean, George Bush Sr. was a dedicated public servant. I mean, in retrospect, I think Dan Quayle maybe should have been a warning sign that things were going to go askance. But we've moved a long, long way from that.
Absolutely, he's head of the CIA and everything. Yep. But when I think about the transition from that Republican Party, the grand party, if you will, to this hateful, fear-mongering, racist, vile party that exists today. Where was that transition, right? And I know that Trump is a product. He's a byproduct of many things. He didn't just come out of thin air, right? Mm-hmm. He being the despicable showman and marketer, if you will, that he is, he seized on that wave, and he just rode that wave, and he became, I always look at Trump and say he's kind of like a Facebook political argument come to life. Mm-hmm. Just, but where did but what gave him that platform? And I always go to Sarah Palin. I go to first of all, the election of Obama, because, there was going to be some kind of reaction to electing the first, not only black president, but a black president with a Muslim name, okay, with a middle name Hussein. And so, but I had no idea it was going to be as bad as it is. So that gave rise to someone like Palin, right? The rise of Obama gave the rise to Palin. It's the light and the dark. And I don't mean that obviously from race, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Good versus evil, like very black and white, stuff here. And I find it interesting that that's where you finally had enough.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it kind of instructive as well to sort of look at what the far left yahoos are saying and what the far right yahoos are saying, because very often it's similar. But when it comes to the trajectory of the GOP, if you go back to Reagan, there were plenty of people who were, putting on Che Guevara T-shirts and holding up signs that said he was a Nazi. And there were plenty of people doing the same thing to both Bushes. So it's really a difference in degree right now and not kind. So I think that those those seeds were planted a long time ago, that the Republican Party was ripe for someone to come in and just say, we don't care about morality. We don't care about really anything except banning abortion and basically accumulating power. And that's what's happened. I mean, there was the veneer of, we're going to be the party of the rule of law or of family values, which now, of course, that's become a complete joke. Right. And then Trump came along and just said, gosh, these evangelicals, if I just promise to give them everything they want, they're going to fall into line. And they did. The evangelical movement, yes, is supporting the most, immoral, illiberal, anti-religious, really. I mean, to the extent that, religion is supposed to represent something good and morally grounding, the most indecent person who's ever held the office. And it's just absolutely staggering. But, as long as they get their judges and their tax cuts, they seem okay with that.
And you talk about abortion, and that's all you have to do. And you have to say, Merry Christmas and God bless America. Yeah. And he's the most unpatriotic, self-righteous person that's ever held that office. And yet all he has to do is stand on the stage at CPAC and hug the American flag. And look at him. He's such a patriot. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's absolutely disgusting. Well, listen, I could go all day long about Trump. I really find that fascinating. Your journey.
And one other thing I might point out that's interesting, because people may not know the history, is abortion became a political wedge issue well after I was born and when I was already aware of politics. It happened in the mid-1970s. A bunch of guys like Paul Weyrich and Richard Viguerie sat down and thought, how do we turn the party that got absolutely destroyed by JFK when Barry Goldwater was the nominee, how do we get those people to rise up and to support Ronald Reagan and get him to beat the moderate wing of the party? And they basically just decided, let's take the abortion issue. The Catholics are already against it. Mm-hmm. Actually, before that time, it had not been a political issue. When I was growing up, as I said, the Republican Party platform was even pro-choice. So they consciously decided, let's get the evangelicals riled up. And they did it successfully. I mean, the Southern Baptist Leadership Conference was pro-choice in the 1970s before this happened.
It's fascinating.
This is a really new issue. And all these people that, even friends of mine who I argue with about the issue, I don't really realize they've been played. There's people who just decided they were going to get mad about that issue.
Right.
It was not a big issue before, except in certain religious communities, but most said live and let live. So it's an interesting history, and that's really the story of the modern GOP. It's save fetuses at all costs, but don't do a damn thing for them after they're born.
No, and there's a great George Carlin bit from many years ago about the GOP and abortion, and he talks about that especially. He's like, they don't give a damn about you after you're born, though. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I'm going to paraphrase and butcher Carlin, but yeah, it's that hypocrisy's been around for a good while, and I could talk all day long. I kind of have a funny role. It's like men shouldn't sit around and talk about abortion, right? And I'm halfway joking when I say that. They certainly, a group of men should not be sitting around and restricting women's rights.
That's right.
To abortion. That
I think
me
men should
fucking
speak out
crazy.
Exactly, but I think men should speak out as loudly as they can in favor of
absolutely
women's rights, and I think that's an important role.
Yeah, and, that's what I was going to say. This is different because you and I are agreeing, and we're, listen. I have daughters, and that's a right that's not going to be taken away from them. If I can have anything to do with it,
right.
And the whole thing. I mean, I could go on and on and on about abortion as well. So, we both agree, and hopefully, one of the key issues I think going into this next election, this will be a good segue, is I want the candidates to be talking more about Supreme Court justices. Because if Trump is reelected, he will fundamentally transform the Supreme Court. Right now, it's kind of a wash.
Right. He's
got his two, right? It's kind of a wash of who they replaced. But the moment that Ginsburg retires, okay, then it's game over.
And I don't think she's retiring. I mean, I think if she was going to retire, she would have done it by now. And frankly, I kind of hold it against her.
But I'm saying if he gets reelected, though, right?
Yeah, no, but I'm saying if she would have retired earlier in Obama's last term, the court might be a very different place.
Right.
At a time when maybe McConnell wouldn't have quite had the chutzpah to do what he's done now, and he's thrown down the gauntlet. So I'm very scared that the court is going to change even before the 2020 election. Sure. And you're right. I mean, to the conservatives' credit, they knew that that's where they could change policy for generations, and they were laser focused on it. And we thought that the rules were still the rules, and that Merrick Garland would get a hearing and things like that, and that didn't happen. So, we need to not ignore the court, to your point, and people have to understand what it means for women, what it means for gay people, what it means for a whole host of important issues that Donald Trump doesn't get another Supreme Court nominee.
Because what we're living through right now is that we're living through the Mitch McConnell presidency.
That's right.
That's what this is. Right. That's what this is, and make no mistake, if Trump loses in November of next year, they will squeeze in a Supreme Court justice, and they'll come back in session and squeeze one in, and on November 28th. I mean,
So we can win the Senate, and let's not lose sight of that. There's a lot of people who are despairing right now, even about the 2020 presidential election. Right. But it is not out of our reach, especially if more and more of these crimes, like I'm sure we'll talk about what happened yesterday, come to light. It'll become more obvious that Trump is unelectable and shouldn't even be the nominee. And we have a real chance, I think, to have another blue wave. And I think we need to focus on that.
I agree. I also still think it's 50-50 that he's going to get reelected. But more on that in a moment. So let's talk 2020. We're in the middle of this primary. As of right now, we are recording this on September 20th, 2019. We are in the middle of the Democratic primary. Today, we had someone drop out. De Blasio is gone. So now it's only 327 people running.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
What are we going to do without his insights?
Right, exactly. What is your thoughts, just general thoughts on the current state of this? What do you, let me ask you this, a little bit more of a focus question. What are your top 3 to 5 topics, issues, and what candidates are resonating with you on those issues?
Sure. Well, let's start with what I think is the overriding issue. And it's one of the reasons I sort of oppose doing things like a climate debate or a gun debate, because we have a group of candidates who are almost to a person. I've got a couple I'd put aside, Bernie Sanders being one of them, who are absolutely competent, qualified, and would make excellent presidents. And they agree across the board probably on 85% of issues. So I think we do ourselves a disservice by not focusing on what I think the number one issue is, and that's that we have an overt criminal in the White House, and 35% of Americans don't seem to care. And I'm just as concerned that we have the criminal in the White House as that we have a body politic that is so enfeebled that 35% of the people don't mind being repeatedly lied to, because he's owning the libs or whatever. So I think we have a real problem in political culture that we need to fix. And I think we need to elect someone president who can speak to the better angels of our nature to help people understand why it's important to have the rule of law, why it's important to have norms and things like that. I mean, we have so many scandals and so many unspeakable, impeachable things that happen almost every day. We get numb to it, but on the top of my head, blatant marital infidelity, he brags about physical attraction to his daughter. He's clearly involved in money laundering schemes with Russia at Trump Tower. He's employing underage masseuses at Mar-a-Lago who go work for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, there's all of this stuff. And yesterday he appeared to trade U.S. taxpayer dollars for foreign help winning the next election. Mm-hmm. So, he couldn't find Ukraine or Albany on a map. And this is the guy that values voters and evangelical support. So this is the crisis, I think, that's the most important thing. We need to elect a person who can best ensure that not only we undo the violence to the norms and the rules of law that have stressed the system, but that we have someone who can hold Donald Trump to account, as well as everyone who enabled him. Like, someone like Kristen Nielsen should be behind bars. She shouldn't be speaking at an Atlantic conference. And in my view, the person so far who's convinced me that she can do that the best is Kamala Harris. She's my senator. I've had a chance to watch her for quite a while. I think her particular ability to focus, to articulate what's wrong with not only the Trump administration, but what's right with America is a really strong message. And I think, as she's put it, she's the best person to prosecute the case against Donald Trump.
Internally here at Left Crew Politics, there's three of us, me, Jeremy Garoki, and Michael Malloy. And I'm the only one of the three of us that loves her. She's on my top 4 list, and they're not on hers at all. It's an interesting, it's an interesting conversation.
And I saw a couple of never Trump type folks yesterday on Twitter who I really respect, and whose political instincts I really respect, who are sort of left cold by her as well. And I don't understand it. To me, she's clearly head and shoulders above the others. I'm left cold, for example, a little bit by Elizabeth Warren, whereas I know a lot of people are very excited about her. I think you're one of them. Mm-hmm, so, she's actually my top right now. But... So I guess that's why we have choices,
Right,
but absolutely. I'd certainly be happy with, Castro, Warren, Booker, Klobuchar. I mean, there's some good O'Rourke. I mean, there's some decent people running.
I love Castro.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. He'd be my VP choice. If I had the dream ticket, it would be Harrison Castro.
I would be okay with a Harrison Castro ticket, and either whomever is on the top of the ticket, I would go either way. It's funny. We start talking about our favorite candidates and what we like about them versus others. And quite frankly, there's some really, really talented people that are running. Now, going back to our internal debates here, Jeremy and Michael like Bernie. I do not. If you're listening to this and it pisses you off, I'm very sorry. Don't worry. 2/3 of us like him.
Yeah. And don't go to my Twitter feed if you like Bernie.
So Dave doesn't either. Right. And that's why I think maybe that was like subconsciously our initial bond online.
Might have been.
And I don't want to get into bashing him or anything, because the bottom line is this. If he ends up being the nominee, I will tattoo his face on my back and march the streets with Bernie signs. I mean, I will enthusiastically vote for anyone to get rid of Trump. Mm-hmm. But he is absolutely the bottom of my list.
Yep.
But talking about the people that we like. So look, we both like Kamala a lot. I mean, I think Warren is a little bit more my Kamala in terms of who I would prefer. But I would have absolutely no issues with her being the nominee, and I would proudly vote for her. I admire her a great deal. And I still really like Beto a lot. And, I actually volunteered for him over the weekend here in the Dallas area, and had an opportunity to speak with him, and it was really great. And I don't know where his political career is going. His poll numbers I think he's ticked up a little bit to like 4%, whatever. And I don't know if his gun confiscation thing is. I don't know how well that's going to play on the national stage. And one of the reasons I liked him, I could see him flipping Texas. Mm-hmm. Now with the gun confiscation part, I don't know. That could actually throw a little cold water on that. But I would love to see him as a Warren or Kamala VP choice as well, or him or Castro for that matter. And 2 Texans, right? I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. So the trouble with the gun confiscation thing, obviously, is that all along the Second Amendment purists and the NRA have been saying people want to take your guns. And all along, Democrats have been saying, no, we don't. We just want to have sensible regulation. And now we've got 2 people, because Eric Swalwell did it before, saying, no, we really do want to come door to door, basically, and take your guns. So that's going to be a problem. And, I'm not saying it's not good that he raises it and it, maybe moves the parameters of the debate a little bit. But we don't care about the national stage. We care about Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, people have guns and they have AR-15s that they use recreationally and they like them. And it doesn't matter if you and I like that or not. I'm nervous about what that does, because that is an issue that motivates people. Poll after poll suggests much more than people like us maybe would think.
No, I understand that too, and I understand. I live in Texas. There's a gun culture here. I get it. I was raised by a cop. I grew up around guns. I don't want to say I'm pro Second Amendment because I don't know what the hell that means. I am all for someone having a gun to protect their families. I don't personally hunt, but I will cook what you kill. Right. Okay, bottom line. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite there, as long as it's done in the proper fashion, if you will. But these weapons of war, which is what they are, when you can walk into an elementary school and you can kill 15 first graders within minutes or seconds, for that matter. Yeah. Did those kind of weapons belong in the hands of civilians in a civilized society? And so if we all agree that they don't, and we all agree on banning them, then why are we, to Beto's point, why are we okay with people still owning them? Like, and I guess the confiscation part is tough, and maybe the language shouldn't be so. I look at it more like this. If I had grenades in my trunk and I got pulled over and my car was, they wanted to look through my car for whatever suspicious reason, right? And grenades were found, okay? They would confiscate those grenades. They would take them. Mm-hmm. And that's how I look at that issue is if you have an AK-47 and they're now illegal and you're caught with one, it's going to get taken away from you because it's illegal to have it. Mm-hmm. To paint it more that way as opposed to this whole going door to door, because you're not going to go door to door looking for people with possession of cocaine or grenades or whatever. So let's get away from that language. But I do think that something has to be done and something radical has to be done. Guns is something I could talk about. It's one of my top issues. With small children in school, it's maybe my top issue. Oh, absolutely. And we need sweeping legislation on the federal level. None of this bullshit with the state level. Oh, well, Chicago has gun violence and they have strict gun laws. Yeah, they can drive an hour north to curtail those laws and get guns in Indiana or wherever and bring them back. I don't know if my geography is right there, but anyway, forgive me if it wasn't. Yeah, right. I think that's right. But anyway, but my point is we need sweeping legislation. So
I agree. But I don't know. My triplets were in first grade when Sandy Hook happened.
Oh my God.
Of course, the majority of those kids who were senselessly murdered were first graders. And I was actually right near where you live. I was in Arlington, Texas, and I actually had to pull over. I had such a physical reaction to the insanity of that, and just putting myself in the headspace of what would happen if that was, our elementary school. I agree with you 100% that we need to have, much more significant gun control than we have now. And I don't think it's inconsistent with the Second Amendment to do that. And there's all sorts of constitutional reasons, both in precedent and just common sense, why that's true. However, remember what I said at the beginning. What matters right now is we're running against Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. 270 electoral votes. And those electoral votes are coming from places where people have and like guns. So I agree that we need to have gun control. But when we're talking, when we're letting people use words like confiscation or even radical, we've got to be careful because, even if we had just slightly more gun control under the next Democratic president, that still gets Donald Trump out of office. In the same way, we can have Medicare for all, or we can have Medicare for some, or we can have Obamacare. It's still a hell of a lot better than whatever we were going to get out of Trump. So I really don't care about the policy nuances as much. And I'm scared of us going, and we can talk about the Green New Deal all day, going far to the left and trying to be the radical leftist alternative to Trump when what we really need are adults and sane people who have more compassion, more policy chops.
I agree.
More liberalism.
But we do need, but we need inspiring messages at the same time, right? We can't have Hillary Clinton or Al Gore or John Kerry again.
Right. I agree.
We need inspiring. Now, and I'm not saying that gun confiscation is an inspiring message that's going to have progressives come out all over these swing states and it's going to be a landslide. I'm not suggesting that.
No,
I'm just saying that
inspire people to stay home.
It could, but we need to be bold, and that's why I look at someone like Elizabeth Warren. And she's bold, and I mean, this whole thing, she has a plan for that. The woman can talk about policy better than anybody, in my personal opinion. And I think that inspires people, and it's policies that are popular. But to your larger narrative or point about, well, we need to make sure we're running against Trump and his corruption and his pardon my French here, his fuckery, because that's what it is. I think back on that really amazing, I call it amazing, it was terribly depressing, but it was an effective ad, and it was a Clinton ad that was all about Trump's behavior and had children watching the TV, and he's mocking the handicap reporter and all the things that he had done at that point. Mexicans are rapists, banning Muslims, his third grade antics, calling women, fat and bleeding from her wherever, all the awful things he did prior. This is before he was president, before Charlottesville, we could just go down the list of all the things that he has done since then that have been horrendous, from his behavior with John McCain to telling an African-American woman to go back to her own country, etc. It didn't work. I think that people we have normalized him, and people are baked in on their opinion. And the people that love him love that he's unconventional, and they love that he's blunt, and they think that he's a man of the people. He's absolutely not. The ones that hate him. And then there's people in the middle that I think are just numb to it all. And by the way, Trump has brilliantly done that. They're doing it right now with this whistleblower thing. As of this recording, we don't exactly know what happened, but it appears that Trump was probably talking to the Ukrainian president and was offering military aid and funds in exchange for them to go after and prosecute, or to investigate Joe Biden. That's pretty serious.
That's a holy shit moment. I mean, that's
a holy shit moment.
That's impeach him today moment.
And they're already on. The Republicans are already just downplaying this and going after the whistleblower. And on Fox and Friends this morning, they said that, I don't know which one it was. I don't know if it was Kimball or Ducey, but said that making promises and leaking delicate information to other heads of state is simply Trump's art of the deal. Like, that's where we're at with this. Yeah. And so I don't know if going after him works. I mean, what I mean by that, going after policy, yes, but going after his unethical behavior, things that he did in the Mueller report, etc. I don't know, man. I don't know if that. I think everybody's already baked in on that. And the guy, he said it himself. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose his supporters. And I don't think he was being hyperbolic when he said that.
No, I don't think he was either. And he essentially did that when someone died in Trump Tower because he didn't install the right fire detectors. But I agree with you to an extent that his base is baked in, but his base is maybe 35%. And they're going to vote. We know that. But we know that the majority of people, his disapproval numbers are high. But the problem is those people don't necessarily get out and get motivated to vote, especially young people, and especially kind of cosplay leftists and socialists who, think that Hillary was a compromise of some sort. Those people don't necessarily get out. So what we need to do is inspire them to go out and, vote, as you put it, the fuckery out of office. And so, that's what we need to do. And I think someone who can really highlight it and say, this is a 5-alarm fire. This isn't just he's an idiot. This is, he's dangerous, and he's hiring dangerous people, and he's appointing dangerous justices. This, and I shouldn't conflate the Supreme Court with criminality, but I do think the Kavanaugh thing was inexcusable. Gorse is just pretty much a, Federalist Society, he's standard issue, and he's a smart guy, but he's doing things that are so beyond the pale. I do think we really need to make sure that people understand that it's not just, yesterday's news because today's news was even worse, that we need to lay it out. And I do think that's a winning message, to motivate the 65% of people who would put him out of office in a landslide if they actually got out to vote. So I think there has to be a balance. Elizabeth Warren can talk for an hour about healthcare policy, and Trump can say Pocahontas, and he's going to get the headline. Right. And that's the problem. We need someone who can make their own headlines.
That's going to happen.
Who can take it to Trump, not unethically, but maybe in his own style and in his own language, which is another thing I sort of see Kamala able to do. Elizabeth Warren might be able to do that too, but she obviously had an own goal with the Native American stuff.
I think that she didn't do herself any favors with the video she released and everything. I don't know. I mean, I have to give her credit. She puts it out and it's like, see, I'm Native American. It's like, yeah, I have actually more than you do.
Right.
Why did you do that? But I don't think at the end of the day that's going to sway votes one way or the other. Michael Malloy, my partner on this thing, I wish he was on this episode for this, just for anything, just for this topic. He really puts this well in perspective about how just nobody actually gives a damn about that. And Trump's going to, like what Mayor Pete said, no matter what we do, Trump's going to go after us. He's going to call us socialists and names no matter what we do. So, you know what? Let's go big. Let's go bold. Speaking of that, what do you think of him?
I think he's an impressive guy. And I know I have friends who have people who work for him that know him and are really, really impressed with him. It's just, what's interesting to me is I live in the third largest city in my county. And it's twice the size of South Bend, Indiana. Yet this guy has developed a national platform and a national following. I mean, he's done such an incredible grassroots job. It's really amazing. I couldn't tell you today who my mayor is, actually, but I know who Pete is. So yeah, so I'm impressed. I don't think he's going to be our next president, but I think he's got a real future in the party. Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't mind if he was president. He's impressive.
Do you think that being gay would hurt him?
I don't necessarily, which is, I think, a really wonderful thing to be able to say. Even the right-wing commentators that I know and I'm either friends with or acquainted with or just read a lot, no one ever brings that up as a negative. And I think, this is one area where this country really has moved forward. I think on abortion, we take 2 steps forward, 1 back. But I think of gay rights, especially with gay marriage now being normalized and people realizing that the sky didn't fall, I think people have largely moved on from that. I mean, there's obviously a small minority that's terrible about it, but no, it seems good, and he seems to have this really wonderful marriage, and yeah, it's great and inspiring to see.
I mean, it is. I always fear voters. It's nothing ever my own personal view. Like not obviously not with. I mean, we should have by this point had multiple women presidents. I don't care that. I could care less if someone's gay. I don't care if my own kids end up being gay. I just don't care about that stuff. I'm a live and let live person, and none of it is weird to me or grosses me out. And to me, it's all just as natural as anything else. With that said, I just don't trust voters, and I always concern myself with. I mean, and rightfully so. 53% or 54% of white women voted for Trump over Hillary.
That's the most unbelievable statistic.
That's a problem.
Oh, it's
huge. And so white women freak me out, especially when I think about a woman being on top of the ticket.
Right.
But
I often say, in fact, black women are the backbone and the core of the Democratic
absolutely.
base. And I kind of look to them for inspiration, because I think if we listen to them, we'd be in really good shape. And there's certainly people I follow that. That I really listen to a lot more because I think they have their finger on the pulse of where we need to go. And Warren, for example, does need to start polling better with African American women. And, there's so much time. I think we're spending so much time so early picking sides and getting into the nuances. The candidates are going to have a chance leading up to Iowa to really get their message out, and it'll be inspiring to see. But yeah, white women have been a huge disappointment.
They have. And that's, and white men will make me nervous about a gay man being on top of the ticket. Yeah. But you know who Toure is?
Yeah, of course.
He's been a guest on the show. Great. He's awesome. But he put out a great tweet the other day because I have a fear about a woman being on top of the ticket when Warren is my number one choice and Kamala's probably my third. So obviously I want a woman nominee and I want a woman president. I get nervous about voters, right? But he put up something interesting, and I wish I had it pulled up so I could read it verbatim, but I'll paraphrase it. He said, to all you guys out there that are nervous about a woman being on top of the ticket, you should be more nervous about a white male Democrat being on top of the ticket, because we haven't won one of those since 1996. And I thought, whoa, I've not put that in perspective. He's absolutely correct. With the last time a white male Democrat was elected president was Bill Clinton's reelection.
Right.
So, with that said, that's really great perspective.
And the top 2 vote getters in presidential history have been a white woman and a black man.
Absolutely. And Hillary doesn't get enough credit for that.
That's right.
Of course, it was all foreigners that were illegal that voted for her, the 3 million. But hey, you know what I always tell people that say that bullshit to me? I'm saying, you know what? You're absolutely correct. And we're going to do it right this next election, because we sent our army of illegals to California just to get that popular vote. Wait till 2020, baby. We're sending them to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. It's on, right?
Yeah.
Me and George Soros got it this time. We know where to send them.
Right. I'm still waiting for my check.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm going to be wrapping this up here pretty soon, Dave. I really appreciate you talking to us, but let me ask one more final question about 2020. So you said your dream ticket right now, you said is Harrison Castro. Is that correct?
Correct.
What is your prediction? Who do you think is going to be the nominee here? Are we going to get stuck? And I say this with all due respect to the former vice president. Are we going to get stuck with Biden?
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, he's certainly pulling at the top right now. I think a lot of people are conservative. And by the way, the Democratic Party's base is moderate to liberal. It's not far left. So I think there's this safety in knowing that Joe Biden is there. But remember, he's run for president. God, he's run for president since I was a kid.
Right.
He's never done that well. I mean, he's riding on being Barack Obama's vice president right now. And, his age, everything else I think is going to work against him. I don't think it'll be him. I actually think when the dust settles, it's going to be Warren or Harris, probably. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Cory Booker's a great guy. There's so many fundamentally good and decent people that are in this mix. I don't want to discount anyone who might have a moment, but it's feeling to me like Harris or Warren is inevitable. I discount Bernie as well because I look at him like Trump. He's got a following, almost a cult following in the same sort of way. His base is locked in at the 31%. They're probably not, a lot of them are probably not going to vote for the Democratic nominee anyway. I consider them sort of actually unhelpful in the cause. So yeah, I think it's Warren or Harris.
Yeah, I do too, and I hope it is. And I would love nothing more. I'm sorry to put this in perspective like this, but to imagine Trump losing to a woman, it would just be absolutely delicious.
It would.
I mean, it just really would. And a woman of color might even be even more delicious. Well, Dave, thanks so much, man.
Oh, this has been fun.
Yeah, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we'll just have to have you back on the show.
Sounds good to me. You know where to
absolutely.
find me.
So tell people where they can. Oh, actually, before I do this, let me just make my prediction here because I'm agreeing with you. I think we're going to end up with Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris as the nominee, and I bet you that maybe the gun thing pushed Beto out, although he would be a great VP. But I think we're going to have a Warren Castro or Harris Castro ticket. That's just my guess.
That would be amazing.
It would be amazing. I take that all day long.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, Dave. So where can people find you on Twitter?
My Twitter handle is just my name, Dave Quast, DaveQuast. And I welcome anyone to follow along, and I definitely try to retweet things that I think are interesting and that kind of raise the level of debate, and sometimes really snarky things that just make people laugh. So hopefully you find it useful to follow me.
Yeah, Dave is a great follow on Twitter. I highly recommend it. All right, well, thanks so much, man. So, guys, in closing, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Left Crew Politics, and remember to always follow us on Twitter at Left Crew Politic. No S because I ran out of characters. Hit us up on Facebook. We really are blowing up on Facebook. We're coming up on like 12,000 followers, and we just thank you guys all very much for the support there. It's a lot of fun. And hit us up on YouTube as well. We're going to be doing a lot of cool YouTube stuff next year. We're going to launch a new site. We've got big plans. Jeremy's going to be doing a podcast pretty soon about the differences between Texas and California. I can't wait to hear that. I'm going to actually be a bystander. Yeah. He's got really good stuff up his sleeve. And then Mr. Michael Malloy will be doing some stuff soon also. So anyway, on behalf of all three of us, we really appreciate it. And just remember, left is right. Okay. Thanks for listening. And announcer Rachel will take us out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our Left Crew Politics podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Left Crew Politic. Follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/leftcrewpolitics and the LCP website, leftcrewpolitics.com. Search for our channel on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play.
Without care, yeah, I was out of